Morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Kelly Estrada, and I am the director of Educorps. And in the chat, I've just put a little blurb about what Educorps does. We represent the community of individuals interested in growing the future through teaching. And we're really focused on increasing the number and diversity of students entering CSU teacher preparation programs, especially in high needs areas. So I'd like to first introduce Dr. Fred Huey. He is the Director of Educator Preparation and the Department of Education Preparation and Public School Programs at the CSU Chancellor's Office, and he's going to welcome you to the webinar today.
Yes, thank you very much, Kelly. Hi, good morning, and thank you for being here. All right, my name is Fred Huey, and as Kelly has said, I'm one of the directors here at the Educator Preparation Public School Programs. And I will be remiss if I do not say thanks ahead of time and make sure to acknowledge the presence of all the attendees and also all the members of the panel. This indeed is a very important topic, and I really do thank you from the bottom of my heart. Okay, one of the things that I would want to remind everyone, as you could see from the background in my picture, is that we are indeed 23 campuses in one university, and with a strong force that we are showing, particularly with all the different campuses that are represented by the panelists and the attendees, we indeed are trying to focus our efforts into making sure that there is diversity, equity, and inclusion in our recruitment efforts. And through the work of Kelly, that is indeed going through. So it always is important and almost imperative that we look into the data so that we would be able to understand what exactly are the needs of our campuses and how do we serve better, okay, the neighboring districts that we are located in or we are serving. So we need to understand what is out there and what is it that we need to be better at. And this is through data. And having collected so many data and so much data rather, and so many other systems, then it is only best to share best practices among our campuses. And I know that you did not come here to listen to me, so I'm returning the floor to Kelly, and here's to a good webinar.
Thank you so much, Fred, for being here today and for welcoming everyone. Truly appreciate you and the work that you do and your support of us. I'd like to now turn it over to our lead moderator, Jason Chan, who's going to take it away from here. Jason.
Great. Thank you, Fred and Kelly. We're excited to have you all here. Thank you all for joining. And yeah, this is definitely an important topic. As Kelly and Fred were mentioning, this is the title of this topic is using data, technology, and systems to enhance teacher recruitment and outreach. And if you've been on our last couple of webinars, you know that this is the third of a 3 webinar series. And so just as a reminder to the audience here, the way that this webinar is set up, it's in webinar format, so we can interact with you through the chat box. And if you have questions that can be answered either later or if we catch them and we can answer them kind of midstream, there's also a Q&A feature, so you can drop your questions in there. But we'll try to be as interactive as possible while still adhering to this webinar format. So as Kelly and Fred mentioned, my name is Jason Chan. I'm the lead moderator for this particular webinar. Let me go to the next slide here. The previous 2 webinars were lead moderated by my 2 colleagues, Cheryl Odorica from Chico State and Jamie Chan from San Francisco State. So we appreciate your attendance of the webinar series. And if you're just joining us for the first time, they are available on recording. So if you missed them live, then those 2 as well as this one will be available on recording for you to watch at a later time. So as we move into today's topic, we just started with our welcome and introductions. I'll do a little quick backgrounder on this topic of data, technology, and systems. And then we'll have some case study sharing from some of our CSU colleagues at the different campuses, as well as the Chancellor's Office. And then at the very end, we'll do kind of an open, somewhat informal fireside chat Q&A. with our panel of speakers and also with the audience as much as we can get you all involved. So if you attended the first couple of webinars, the format is very similar. So you'll probably see something similar. Here's our panel of speakers for today. So we have Jesus Arellano from Cal State LA. We have Ginger Reyes from the Chancellor's Office and previously from Cal State Channel Islands. We have Cheryl Orderica from Chico State, like we mentioned, Jamie Chan from San Francisco State, and myself from East Bay as our panel of speakers that you'll be hearing from in just a little bit. So let me kind of set us up really quick. We talked about the title of this webinar being using data, technology, and systems. And data is a four-letter word, but it's sometimes used as a big word, a buzzword, and I'm going to start us out by just talking about what is data and just kind of get us all on the same page. And even though we talk about data, and that's one of the words in the title of this presentation, I like to think of it as data creating information that allows us to create insights, come up with insights, and at the end of the day, to do something actionable with it, right? Because if you collect data and you don't really do anything with it, then what value is there in that data? And so let me kind of just start off with this line that you may see on the screen right now that says, what is data, right? And so as you all think about that in your heads, I'm not gonna necessarily pull the audience for this, but you can probably think of data as these things, right? It's anything we collect. So it's measurements, readings, results, information, like we mentioned. And at some point, you take that information that you gather, and then you generate insights from them, and hopefully something that's actionable. So from here, why do we collect data? Okay, I kind of alluded to it a little bit, but I'm going to ask the audience, for those of you that are able to type in the chat box, what would you say, why do we collect data? Aside from sometimes people make us collect data. So Rebecca is saying make predictions in the chat box. Thank you, Rebecca, for getting this kicked off. To inform, yep, definitely. To learn how to move forward, I love it. These are all good. Trends, improvements, yep, absolutely. So as you all are typing that in there, I'm going to show you the first one. And some of you maybe saw my slides. So yes, it's for information, insights, feedback, take action, and make adjustments. So those are some of the things that you all put in the chat box. And if we think about it in a kind of at a higher level, I put together this second bullet point that we talk about, and I don't see if anybody put in the chat box, but a lot of times data is the basis of funding, getting future funding or not getting future funding, right? And I try to be as efficient as possible. Sometimes data allows us to evaluate the results of something we did. And so if it was great, then we do it again. And if it wasn't so great, we either adjust it or we don't do it again. Effectiveness and evaluation, right? Some of the things that you all put in the chat box. So thank you all for participating in that little mini exercise. How do we collect data and organize data? So there's so many options, right? And through the course of this webinar, we're not saying that these are the only ways that there are to do it, or even that these are the best ways to do it. Maybe some of you at our campuses have better ways to do this. But as much as anything, this webinar is a forum to generate some ideas and discussion and to share, right? So we'll share from our respective campuses some of the things that we do. But if there's an opportunity to either on this webinar or in the future to share across campuses, that was kind of one of the purposes of this webinar series. So this is the point that I'll make, though. There are so many options, but one of the things that we should do is just make sure that you do it somehow and do it consistently, right? And technology and systems can help us do this efficiently and effectively and consistently. And there's just so many ways that you can do that. So speaking specifically to recruiting and outreach of the teacher population, our future teachers, so applied specifically to that, what kinds of things do we all do to recruit? And I'm sure I didn't hit everything on the list that we all do, but there's certain things that are public and published, like web pages and social media. there are certain things that we do that are maybe more of an in-person, hopefully like on campus in person very soon, but maybe through Zoom and other online media these days, like these welcome and orientation events, educator fairs, the things that we do that we call like fairs and booths and tables. And then there's also speaker and webinar events like the ones that we're doing right now, right? Either to our group here, our audience, or to audiences of maybe future prospects of future teachers. And then there's also one-on-one and small group communications interactions that are often done as well. So why do we do these things, right? So when we talk about recruiting, outreach, advising, at the end of the day, we're trying to connect with people. These are the people that are eventually, hopefully, going to apply for and progress through the credential programs and these various programs that we offer. And before these people decide to apply in general and to your program specifically, they need information on whether they should do it. And then number two, why they should apply to a particular campus or program specifically. Right. So I'm not going to read through all the bullet points. You can read that. But at the end of the day, the goal of a lot of us that are here on the webinar today is to grow our population of qualified credentialed teachers. But that doesn't just happen by, snapping our fingers and it's like, oh yeah, I have a cohort of future teachers. There's steps to this. And it starts with connecting with people, getting them the information that they're looking for, and ultimately, them applying to the program and enrolling. But one of the keys to whatever you do, whether it's recruiting, outreach, advising, anything else really, is follow-up and effective communication. So I'll just speak for myself. If somebody tells me something one time, sometimes I'll forget about it, or sometimes it's important, but I just won't do it right away. But if they catch me at the right time, or if I see some follow-ups and the communication media is effective, then I'll go ahead and do what it is that I need to do. So follow-up and effective communication is the key to a lot of these things that we try to do, especially in recruiting and outreach for these future teachers. So the how is what we're going to be covering during the session. Again, ideas, better practices, not necessarily the only way, but this is where we've invited a few respective representatives from the various campuses to share with us some of the things that they're doing at their campuses so that we might be able to learn from each other. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Jesus, representing Cal State LA.
Great. Thank you so much, Jason. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for this opportunity. My name is Jesus Arellano. I am actually filling in for Ana Zambrano today. I am the academic advisor for the Charter College of Education here at Cal State LA. I work with our two undergraduate programs, Rehabilitation Services and Urban Learning. In our program, students can earn a Bachelor of Arts degree in Urban Learning and a Bachelor of Science degree in Rehabilitation Services. My presentation today will focus on communication tools that I and my colleagues use to support our students in teacher preparation programs. The Urban Learning program offers students the opportunity to complete their bachelor degree along with a multiple subject credential, a special education credential, or a dual credential combining both special education and multiple subject. My other colleagues work with students in credential programs that are in other colleges here at the university. Thank you. So some of the strategies we employ include targeted courses, creating watch lists, and breaking down information. Targeted courses include an Intro to Higher Education course for freshman students and a teacher preparation course for junior and transfer students. These courses specifically for us are CCOE 1010, which is an Introduction to Higher Education course for the Charter College of Education, and ULearn 3000, a college success and urban teacher prep for the Urban Learning program. We mainly use Navigate LA to create watch lists to determine which students are in these courses and which students are not. And we use Navigate LA to determine who needs to take the required course to ensure that students are on track toward a timely graduation. Next slide, please. So building upon information, critical I'm sorry, building upon information is critical for students, especially first generation students with little understanding of higher education and the credentialing process. Year one is mainly focused on preparing the students for their academic career by developing an initial roadmap and highlighting important courses. Retention support is provided for the students the second and third year. During year two, we reassess the student's degree choice and start breaking down credentialing information. We begin to talk about the types of credential options and prepare students for the next steps, including credentialing exam requirements. Integrated students start taking credential-specific courses their third year after they have applied to the credential program and have been conditionally admitted. This is a year when students are supported with certificate of clearance, education statements, and with the reintroduction of the requirement to be recommended to the state for credentialing. Students complete their degree coursework during the fourth year to prepare them for student teaching and ultimately graduation. To support our students, we have a few selected critical courses each year to target these students, to create a campaign and to disseminate all pertinent information. Next slide, please. Thank you. So as I said, we use Navigate LA to search for students in urban learning ITEP programs. And if you are familiar with Navigate LA, you know that you can use filters to create campaigns to contact a specific group of students. With this in mind, Navigate LA is a tool used to set a time frame for the targeted students to schedule an appointment with their advisor to ensure the student is on track. Next slide, please. So one of the most recent campaigns that I conducted was for students in an integrated teacher elementary prep program, was for students in their third year. The targeted population was students with 60 or more completed units that applied to a credential program with a minimum of 2.67 GPA and enrolled in EDCI 4000, which is basically the first course in the credential program. And EDCI 4000 for us is the transformative teaching in diverse urban classrooms. The campaign was set up using filters designating a specific time. This was done during the first 6 weeks of the spring 2022 semester, and specifying that it is a requirement for the EDCI 4000 course, which requires an interview with the potential candidate and then providing them with an education plan. Next slide, please. Thank you. Before the campaign began, all qualifying students were sent an invitation through Navigate LA. The first week of the campaign, an email reminder was also sent out via Navigate LA. The students were again sent a reminder email 2 weeks into the campaign. And the third and fourth weeks, individual phone calls were made to remind students of the requirement. Lastly, individualized emails were sent the fifth week. And this is the campaign outcome. So the strategies used worked. I managed to meet with all the candidates, conducted the interviews, and provided them with education plans. I think there's another, oh, I'm sorry, that's it, Jason. Completed all of the requirements within the 6-week time frame. The students all understood the process and everyone involved was notified of the campaign completion via email. Various means of communication were employed, campaign invitations via Navigate LA. The communication clearly indicated that it was a mandatory part of the EDCI 4000 class. It also indicated that we would be going over an education plan and we would be conducting an interview. Email, telephone, and direct contact from the instructor were instrumental, not to mention social media, Canvas, etc. The approach to this campaign was based on the student's individual place, if you will, in the program, asking myself questions like, do they know which program they are pursuing, which required courses have they completed, have they attended informational sessions, Can they communicate effectively as future educators, and so on? Like all systems, Navigate LA isn't perfect and sometimes doesn't catch all of the students that one would be filtering. This is especially important for us having students from different colleges, including arts and letters, natural social sciences, health and human services, etc. And to support our partnering college, we take a multi-modal approach to connect with our students and in turn connect with them with their respective advisors. And I think we all know it is imperative for us to keep all our students informed to continue our retention efforts in our college as well as university-wide. And my colleague Ana Zambrano specifically uses Google Text. I believe the next slide will show you some samples. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, everybody. My name is Ginger Reyes. I am the System-Wide Director of Admissions and Outreach for the California State University Chancellor's Office. And as Jason mentioned, I was formerly the Assistant VP of Enrollment Management at California State University Channel Islands. Next slide, please. The goal today is to talk to you a little bit about the utilization of Cal State Apply for you to be able to cultivate prospects. Next slide. For those of you not familiar with Cal State Apply, it is the system-wide application for students to apply to your university. So some of you might be familiar with it with applying for students applying to your credential programs or the graduate programs, but the bulk, yes, we are aware, a lot of students do apply on the undergraduate side. Next slide, please. So when students who are applying as undergraduates, first-time freshmen and transfer students, so if we're thinking about your future prospect pool, they can log into this website right here. Go ahead and when they go to My Application and click on Personal Information. Next slide, please. And in the other information, they will actually, it's a mandatory question that all students have to answer, which is asking the student at the time they're applying to whichever their degree is, which usually is their first bachelor's degree. They would indicate if they're not interested in applying to a credential program, are they planning to apply to a credential program at a later time? Or if it happens to be that they're planning to apply to a credential for this particular term. So the CSU receives thousands upon 100,000 applications to the California State University system. So this data is currently being collected. What you can do with that data is be able to pull that information. Next slide, please. So that you can create your own prospect pool. So some of the things you want to think about when knowing that your campus is already currently collecting this data is consider the timing. At the time that the students are applying, it's usually the October of the year, 1 year before they plan to enroll. So I would work with your admissions office because normally, a university receives more undergraduate applications than who ultimately enrolls. So I would look at, because a student, there's no guarantee the student's going to plan to attend your institution, is usually waiting until May 1st to obtain this data. Because May 1st is usually the universal commitment deadline for undergraduate students to indicate they plan to enroll in that respective institution. So once you know that pool, then you should be able to pull that data so that you can upload them into whatever database or look at how you can mine and nurture that pool for your future incoming class. So you can either work with your admissions office to be able to obtain that list and exporting the data of the respective fields you need, or if you are actually granted Cal State Apply Web Admit access, you can pull this yourself. Next slide, please. So when you log into Web Admit, next slide, there's an ability to actually create lists. So it's under List Manager of the applicant list, and you create the new field where you can isolate the students who answered your question. So in looking at the field list, you can indicate, For example, I want to pull every student who answered this question, yes, and even if it's also for a specific credential objective, such as single subject, multiple subject, or even for any of the specialist credentials your campus may offer, you can pull that data. So it creates a list, isolate which students are there, and then there's an export feature within Cal State, the liaison web admin feature that you should either your admissions office has access to, or you may have this access where you can export other information. It could be even the student's email address, first name, last name, what their admission status with the university is, meaning if the student has decided they've already committed to planning on attending. So at least you have a rough idea of, okay, if 50,000 students, I'm going to use one of our sister campuses. So if Cal State Long Beach received 50,000 undergraduate applications for them, and it happened to be that 3,000 of them had selected liberal studies as possible teaching, and that they ultimately, dwindled it down to 1,500 of those students committed to attending the university for that major. That's 1,500 that you can actually pull and get that information. It does take some coordination within your admissions office if you don't have access to those lists for them to obtain that data for you. Because again, looking at the cycles of enrollment and from the undergraduate perspective is some students during the application filing period are not necessarily aware of, well, what I'm getting contacted by the admissions office, but I'm getting contacted by credential. They don't at least yet know what does it mean when it comes to getting a credential. It's something that you can introduce once you get that data. So next slide, please. So some of the things you want to consider is once you have that data, using whatever tools you have, you can go ahead and pull that data, and that way you can then introduce what I would say is in regards to what's the pathway to become a teacher. When we would talk to undergraduate students, particularly undeclared and liberal studies students, they weren't necessarily sure. They knew they wanted to be a teacher, but they didn't know what that meant. They didn't know what a credential was. So it's being able to explain it to them while they're in the process of investigating. One of the things that we would look at is how you utilize your orientation or your advising sessions, particularly for the undergraduate level. Is that an opportunity for the credential office to go in during those sessions, which granted the years we've done have been online, but maybe in person, of having maybe a couple minutes to be able to talk to parents and students about, well, what does this mean if your child is interested in this? What's the path? We have seen that students who have favorable experiences as their undergraduate career want to be able to continue their future studies, usually at the institution that they are applying at, which would be a natural ability to apply to the credential program. So that's one way that we would encourage you to work with the admissions office to be able to obtain that data. Another is if you're already in the web admit feature and you are currently have access to your credential applicant pool, because we know there are so many students who start the application process but never actually finish it, there are features within the Cal State Apply web admin that's on the back end. You have the ability to send emails to your prospective students and your applicants. So the prospects, meaning the students who haven't fully finished their application, maybe they're in progress, you can go in, you can send them emails through that feature to be able to provide communication to them. That's within the system already, that already comes. It's different than some of the CRM platforms out there, but this one is there. But also once students have committed to already attending and have already enrolled, I'm sure, one of your avenues too is that you're working with your registrar office to obtain the current list of declared majors so that you can already start to provide that outreach to students in advance. And I believe one of our colleagues is going to talk about EAB and using that to track student appointments and pulling that data to utilize as high prospects for you. Thinking about the enrollment funnel and thinking about how you fulfill that funnel, the first part is always thinking about how do I get more prospects in that pool to eventually whittle down to eventually who will end up applying and enrolling. So it's that prospect cultivation, and this data feature within Cal State Apply is just one avenue for you to consider as you're thinking about how to obtain more students. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Ginger, for all that information. That was awesome. Okay. Hello, I'm Cheryl Orderica, and I'm the Grant Senior Recruitment Coordinator and Advisor at Chico State. And I've been in this role for about 7.5 years now, and I'm very, very passionate about teacher recruitment and retention while sustaining an organized intake system for prospective teacher candidates and to enhance equity and diversity within tailored outreach strategies and best practices. So I'm very proud to be here today and also to see all the wonderful strategies other institutions are implementing. Okay, so currently I am recruiting for the CLASS program. So CLASS stands for Computational Literacy Across Secondary Settings. It is a 5-year teacher quality partnership grant, TQP grant, funded by the U.S. Department of Education. And this is actually the 3rd TQP grant Chico State has been awarded. And it's definitely a documented, successful, structured program. It's based off the teacher residency model. And we integrate a Master of Arts in Teaching with either a single subject credential in math, science, or English in 1 year, or an ed specialist credential with an emphasis on mild mod and mod severe with a Master of Arts in Teaching in 18 months. So it's super accelerated, innovated. And additionally, we offer a living stipend, which is amazing, up to $36,000 for all of our teacher residents. So this is, I'm recruiting grad students for this grant program at Chico State. So it's based off the cohort program. We're in our 3rd year, and the co-teaching model, where residents are paired up with a dedicated mentor, teacher, and supervisor specific to their subject area at a high-need rural district. And so CLASS offers that academic and financial support. Here's a quote from one of our residents throughout that program. So we've definitely had many successful years with this, and I'm really proud to be a part of this. So that being said, we have 2 recruitment cycles per academic year. And I have to say, really organized with a reliable, equitable, and innovative system when conducting like this recruitment and advisement efforts to prospective grad students, along with managing our marketing investments, because I have various marketing avenues. I have a huge digital marketing campaign each year that I manage. So to enhance those tailored marketing strategies to attract a diverse applicant pool into the teaching profession. So that's just an overview of my program. Next slide. Okay, yeah, that's too great. So in order to uphold an organized recruitment database, one must stay organized with potential high quality prospects and always follow up. The first step for a program was to create a catchy URL. So I created classteachers.org to attract future candidates to our website in a manageable and accessible way. And then our campus creative and technology team, they embedded a questionnaire form that states specific questions that I created, and I can always update as well, to then extract the data I needed for future campaigns and reports. So we use Cognito forms, and every inquiry is shown on a simple intake form. It's on the website, it's free. You can download the reports, organize and present the data however you prefer. And this saves me really a lot of time, and it acts as a pre-screening process So I created a questionnaire form of the questions I would like, and it screens them. And it really narrows down potential students for the class program and essentially for the School of Education and the teaching profession, because whoever does not qualify for this grant, because there's specific requirements, I just refer them to the School of Ed. So it's super cost effective, accessible, and very user friendly. And it also helps me stay accountable with following up, because I get emails every time a potential student fills out the intake form. And then I can build those relationships and follow up. And it definitely enhances communication and really demonstrates a sense of professionalism. And then also, lastly, I really look forward to analyzing our data each fiscal year, because then it assists our team with those tailored EDI marketing campaigns and a process to help me stay organized. So that's it for now. And thank you very much. And I'll now pass it over to Jamie.
Greetings. I'm Jamie Channon from San Francisco State. I'm a program director and recruiter directly related to the MISTI funds, the Math and Science Teacher Initiative. So I look at STEM teacher recruitment. And I think my story, next slide, Jason, thank you. I think my story is really less about the data management, but more about the engagement and retention. So as the students already have identified as wanting to be future teachers, how do we support them and ensure their matriculation into the credential program? And what kind of information do we collect and how do we collect it? So I work in the Center for Science and Math Education. It was founded in 2007. CSME is made up of students, faculty, and practitioners who value socially just and equitable STEM education. In the center, what we do is we recruit and mentor emerging teachers. That includes undergraduates, as well as prospective credential students from outside of the university, so they haven't matriculated through the undergraduate program. We sustain a community of STEM educators, practitioners, and students throughout the year. We promote equity and inclusion through anti-racism education and research, and we maintain an expansive STEM education resource center. In the time that I've been there since about 2007, we've supported 500 plus students, contributed to 58,000 hours of community service in K-12 classrooms. Picture down there in 2019, before we had to all wear masks. So we're going to go back to that this year. So we're really excited that we're going to be in person soon. We've been largely distant still. Next slide. Our model is generally such that we look for undergraduates and we're broadening our pool. So that's why Ginger's talk was so informative for me, because when we look at how we can create future STEM teachers, we really do need to increase the number of prospective applicants. And we need to also change the identities and relationships to STEM. The STEM is often a place where people feel not necessarily welcome, especially if we are looking to diversify that pool, which is what my research looks at. So, you know, we're looking broadly at liberal studies, ethnic studies. We have Metro teaching academies, they're bridge programs. And so we go to those spaces and we try to make them what we call CSME teacher fellows, funded by the MISTI program. And through that support system and communication systems that come through that program, we hope to bring them to the SFSU credential and teaching careers. Next slide. So how we do that is we do have a team of people here at San Francisco State. I'm a program director currently there. Dr. Seashore is a PI of our current Noyce grant. So if people are familiar with the Robert Noyce scholarships, and Dr. Tendai Chitwari is our director at the center. And together we work on recruitment and support through research, as well as just through our practice and our programs that we manage. Next slide. So how we do that is we kind of are trying really hard to be culturally responsive. And again, to serve the mission of the CSU to broaden and diversify that pool, as well as just sustaining and supporting the existing students that want to become STEM teachers. What we did very early on is we collected data literally by taking students to lunch. Students were nominated through faculty, so we had a network of communications in which we would tell faculty in STEM and education, select students, nominate them. Educorps also created a series of events on our campus that helped this nomination process. And then we collect their information through basic Google Forms. Things that help broaden our advising, our touch points with the individual students. As you can see, here's a chart of the students I've advised since I started working here in 2008. It's increased over the years, and it's specifically because the pandemic, interestingly enough, shifted our advising to virtual format. We had never really done that before. And by offering virtual advising hours as well as in-person drop-in hours this year, since we were able to return to campus, we've actually increased the number of individuals that get this advising and career pathway information regularly. We call them coffee chats. We do intend to have snacks when we can take masks off eventually inside. But we are trying to create this environment where students do not need to have one-on-one. They can drop in, they can have one-on-one appointments, and they can have them on demand. I certainly been working out of office hours. A lot of our students are first generation working class. They have a lot of other family members they care for. So we really do have to be quite flexible. And so this virtual advising format has worked really well. And it's been a form of data collection for us as we have them do an exit survey every time we see them. And also we're working on identity shifts within STEM teacher development. A lot of research points to the fact that our BIPOC students are not necessarily seeing themselves in those pathways. They are most challenged there. Not just academically, but in a social cultural sense. And so the programs that we develop, such as the Noise Scholarship, the Teacher Fellowship Program, which is funded by Misty, led into this cohort of students that we hire, maintain, which are alumni of our program. They're called teachers in residence. There's a picture of me with a few of them down there. And they're all alumni of our program. And what we do is we actually have them do the advising when we do our meetings. So in a way, when we gather all of our students, we have about an N of about 50 to 60 students annually that are future STEM teachers or future K-5 teachers that are interested in strengthening STEM teaching in their practice. We have them do the advising in mass, kind of like I was thinking the word flash mob, but we do we're all there at the same time. We provide the information and they can choose who they go to in that space. And we all get back together at the end of the day. Again, the students take the exit survey to identify what they've learned, what they still need support on. And the teachers in residence, as I call them, about 6 of them, we get back together and we do planning around that. And because I'm the program director, I will often act on the next steps to help to ensure the students stay in the system. We also, up until yesterday, had a residency program. Jason also can understand that. We are no longer having a teacher residency, but that was also a source of support. And we have courses such as STEM House, which is practical experiences, in which we give advising in the course itself, actually towards the end of the semester for every time we teach that course. Next slide. So Jason asked me to talk about how do we get all these people together in one space. And so the platforms that we have utilized in the past include scheduling tools like Doodle, really very helpful because there's a picture there of some of our faculty and residents. Again, our model is really expansive at the center. We use alumni in-service teachers as informal advisors and mentors. We also have faculty that we retain in one form or another, and their commitment is to identifying and advising and mentoring students from the undergraduate years into the credential, being those touch points for them. And so how do you get them all together? It's actually quite challenging. So we use a doodle poll to meet regularly during the semester, and this is a way to do that. You select times that you're available. They will check them off. What's really lovely is they can check them off on varying degrees of commitment too. And eventually you can create a master calendar in which you can get them all together. Next slide. When is Good is another platform. It does a similar thing in that you can gather people's availability. If you pay for the subscription service, like the premium service, which we do not do, but if you did, again, there's another level of team engagement in that they can tell you it's possible, but not ideal, fine for you, perfect for you. So those kind of things are really helpful when trying to get together with faculty, staff, and in-service teachers. Next slide. Go ahead, Jason.
All right, great. Thanks, Jamie, and everybody who presented before you. So that's definitely a challenge, like Jamie was talking about, getting people together. And I'll talk a little bit about our program at Cal State East Bay. But our program, so the next slide for myself, is our program at East Bay is a post-bac program. So unlike at LA and maybe some of the other campuses that you all work with, we are not an ITEP program. So we get people that come from our university, definitely our undergrads, but many of them, probably the majority of them, come from the community. They're second career seekers, and so they're coming from everywhere. And so our program is a 1-year, 3-semester program, and we have one admit period per year. So everybody starts in summer semester. We don't have like rolling admissions, or I think Cheryl was saying they have a couple of cohorts. And so that's sort of the timing of our program. Let me kind of preface what I'm going to share by saying this. So what I'm going to share is kind of about communication, and some of it about scheduling, and some of it about creating a customer database. But that being said, my position at Cal State East Bay is part-time. So I work part-time with Cal State East Bay. I do other things other than Cal State East Bay. And some of you that are in the audience right now may be full-time with your university, or maybe you're not. But maybe at your university, even if you're full-time, maybe you have multiple priorities and you have other positions that you're responsible for. And so being able to calendar and to schedule things efficiently, to the point that Jamie was saying about when is good and doodle polls. I'm a fan of email. Email is great, but I'm not a fan of sending 10 or 20 emails back and forth to schedule a group meeting. So those types of technology, like I take advantage of, because everybody gets one email, fill out the doodle poll, fill out the when is good, and then we'll figure it out. Okay, so as I go into my slides, that's kind of how I'd like to kind of orient ourselves, as to, we're all super busy, and I get that as much as everybody else. And so the things that I try to do are to try to build in efficiencies as much as possible, while still accomplishing our goal of connecting with people, connecting with prospects, getting them the information that they need, and accomplishing our goal. So one of the things that I do, and I've seen others do this as well, I use Calendly. And so I've seen other platforms as well that do similar things, but it basically, I feel like it empowers our prospects, because they can choose a time to meet with me one-on-one that's good for them, right? There's no 10 or 20 emails going back and forth about what days and times are good for you. And then, something changes and now there's more emails. But the Calendly allows you to easily schedule 30-minute one-on-one meetings with me using your schedule, right? And to Jamie's point, I think we're all sensitive to these things at our respective universities. Everything that I'm going to show you that I do doesn't cost any money. So, there's definitely systems at our campuses that are elaborate and in place that I maybe don't use. But the things that I'm going to show you here don't cost anything to our campuses, at least not right now. Okay, so I mentioned about avoiding the back and forth emailing. This is the Calendly. If you can see, I don't know if can you see my mouse waving? Yeah, okay. So this is the Calendly screen. So if you click on this Calendly URL that I created, it's off of Calendly, but you can customize this last part. I called it CSU EB teacher info. If you click on this, it'll bring you to this screen. And so when I was creating this slide a couple of days ago, you can see here that it was open for Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. And right now, if you can see my calendar, we're right here. I'm busy right now. I'm in a webinar. So that time was not available for somebody to select automatically, because Calendly is synced with my calendar. And so if somebody wants to schedule a meeting with me, they go in, they click on this, they can see when they have an opportunity to schedule with me. And it's based on my calendar with East Bay stuff, as well as other stuff that I do, that tells you when I'm available to meet with you. Okay, and you choose the time that works for you. So that's really nice for me, that I don't need to send all these emails back and forth just to schedule a 30-minute meeting. I can send out this Calendly link, and it's at the bottom of my email signature, so that anybody that gets my email can go ahead and do that. And this last bullet point I have here says you can customize the settings and link your calendars with your preference and your availability. I see in the chat that there's a question about whether it works with Outlook calendars. So at East Bay, we have a Google platform, if you can tell. I'm not sure if it works with Outlook. I would think that it does, but I don't know for sure, because that we use a Google platform at East Bay. Okay, so like I mentioned, as a user, you can set a lot of different settings with it. And this is just one screenshot of a certain settings screen, but I kind of made a list for you of things that I use that help me manage my time and to schedule appropriately with what I need to do. So you can set a meeting duration. So for me, I set only 30-minute meetings, and I believe in the free version, you only get to choose one type of meeting. If you want to pay for an upgraded subscription, you can make multiple meetings, like a 15-minute, a 30-minute, a 60-minute. But for the free version, I only have the 30-minute option available, and that seems to be working for me. You can set how many days out you want to allow somebody to book for. So if you can see on my screen here, I have it set for 60 days. Okay. So if somebody wanted to schedule with me in September, that's not available right now, but somebody can schedule all the way out to, what is it now? Almost end of May. So June, July. So they can schedule like out to July, I think right now with me. Okay. You can set your daily and weekly availability, which means that for me, again, I'm part-time with East Bay, but I make my calendar open between like 8 or 9 and 5 o'clock on Monday through Friday. And so if you have other priorities or other things that you do at your university with your position, you can set it so that it's like, well, you know, I only want to make these appointments available in the afternoon or in the mornings or on certain days or whatever the case may be. Okay. And in my setting, I set a max number of appointments per day because especially as application deadlines come up, like I don't want to be doing like 10 or 20 of these in a certain day. So I can set a maximum number of appointments per day that I allow people to book with me. Okay. And then you can also set a buffer time before and after appointments. So for me, I put 30 minutes before and 30 minutes after. If there's something on my calendar, somebody cannot book within 30 minutes of something I have on my calendar, because you never know when you might need to prep for something before, or your meeting might run a little bit over. And so I don't want them stacked back to back to back to back. Okay, so that's another option. And then like I was showing you, my Google Calendar was in the previous slide on the right side. The Calendly interface was on the left side, and those are integrated. So at least in the free version, I think you can link one calendar, and I kind of jerry-rigged it, I think, so that it kind of worked out for the way that I did it. But like a lot of these recruiting and marketing campaigns, some of this is just trial and figuring out what's working or not, and then tweaking it. So I somehow got my system set up to work for how I have mine set up. Okay, and I see in the chat box, it looks like Kathy and maybe her campus is using the paid version. I might have to figure out how to eventually get funding to get the paid version, but yeah, so I think that's for those of you that use some sort of a system like this, hopefully it saves you some time and headache and create some efficiency in what you do. And when somebody chooses to schedule with me, you can put in pre-meeting questions. So for me, I just put in one question in there that says, tell me anything that will help us with our meeting time, right? So it's very open-ended, but if you wanted to put more stuff in there, you can put more stuff in there. But I keep it relatively simple. They just have to put in their name, their email address, and if they want to, they can tell me a little bit about what they want to talk to me about. Okay. And then again, there's links in the meeting to reschedule and cancel the meeting. So, you know, again, they don't have to send me an email that says I need to move my meeting or I need to cancel it. You can go ahead and just click on that and change the time yourself. And if it works with my calendar, then choose whatever time you want. Or if you have to cancel it, then you just cancel it and do it later or not at all at that time. Okay, so that's a little bit about Calendly with what I do. And then there's another system that I use that a lot of you may be familiar with, which is MailChimp. Okay, so the what Cheryl was talking about with her Cognito intake system, I have something similar that I do through MailChimp. And so you can see on the left side here, if you've used MailChimp or some other database system like this before, it can create a list of customer data for you, prospects in this case. And for me, like when I'm working welcome fair and orientation or something that has like a tabling type of an event, then I create a QR code that goes directly to this website. And my people that come to my table or booth can use their smartphone, and they can just scan over this QR code and go right here and type this all in themselves. Not all of these sections are required. I think I just require an email address, first name, last name. But you can see here in some of the questions that I'm asking, I'm trying to ask, what grade level are you interested in, what subject, and when are you planning to apply? And so I have that information from them, similar to what Cheryl was saying, and I have a little bit of insight into what their goals are and what their time frame is on that. Okay, so this is MailChimp using it to build a CRM, to build a customer database. The other nice thing that I found about MailChimp, and I would imagine there's other customer CRMs that allow you to do this, is in MailChimp, I can put tags on people. And so I can put tags that reflect the lead source. So I know like which event was I working where I met these people. I can put the application timeline. So if they are getting ready to graduate next year, then I know that if we're sending out reminders for applications, that I can include them. But if they're a freshman and they're not going to graduate for 4 years, if you get emails like that from me, then that's kind of annoying if you're not even a few years from graduating. And so I have those lead source, application timelines, credential type, and subject. So for example, in the campaign I'm going to show you in the next slide, it was for our residency program, which is specifically for math and science teachers. And so I have things in here that allow me to tag with math and science versus other subjects or multiple subject, so that again, I can tailor my messages, my campaigns, my emails to what is most relevant to the people that I'm trying to send to. Okay. And the other nice thing, or let me mention that in the next slide. So now that I have a customer database, now I can use MailChimp to also do targeted email marketing. And so when you do this, you can create these campaigns, and you can use your customer database to be able to tailor your messages. So as an example, and I'll give you a learning opportunity that I ran into. So when we use email to do a lot of these things, Google and Yahoo and some of these email clients are, I don't know what you want to call it, but getting either sophisticated or annoying with their spam filters. And so I sent out an email through my regular Cal State East Bay email with blind copies to my targets, because I wanted to respect their privacy and not share everybody's email. And it turns out that got filtered to their spam and junk folder with a lot of the people that I talked to. So they never saw my email. With MailChimp, you can set it up so that you can do like a Dear Jason, right? And I can merge it so that it merges to the name in my customer line, so that mine says Dear Jason, Cheryl says Dear Cheryl, Jamie says Dear Jamie, so that however these spam filters work are less likely to filter your thing out into spam, and then there's a higher likelihood that they might see your email. Okay, so on the slide that I have up here right now, I talk about you can get data and feedback on deliveries, on bounce backs. It'll also kind of automatically update your database. And you can also, when you do a campaign, you can also get data on open rates, top link clicks, and things like that. So like we were talking about before, if you put together a campaign and you run something, you can see how successful was that campaign, and can you adjust something so that you can try to make it better next time, right? And so on the next slide here, I have an example of a campaign that we ran for targets, like I was mentioning, of our residency program. And this is specifically for math and science teachers, okay? And you can see here that this particular campaign for people, I was targeting 300 recipients from my database. And of that, 146 opened it. So that's about half. And that's not horrible. That's actually pretty average. And successful deliveries were 298. So I know that the majority of my emails are getting to my targets. Whether they're opening them or not is a different question. And that may allow me to adjust my subject line. That may be able to allow me to adjust certain things so that my open rate maybe is higher in, for a subsequent campaign. And over here, you can see that I had a couple of links, a few different links in this particular campaign. One of them was trying to get them to come to a webinar that we were doing to try to explain the residency program. And so I have this link that went to an Eventbrite, not covered in this session, but I use Eventbrite also. But I had this link that went to an Eventbrite registration form. And so I can see how many people are clicking on these different links. If you can see over here, and I have some stuff covering it right now, but I see in here that I made mention of our noise program also. It wasn't the focus of this email campaign, but I can see that people are clicking on the noise link also. So they're interested in noise, even though that wasn't the primary goal of this campaign. So that tells me that I should probably provide some information about our noise scholarship program, and or maybe do another webinar later on, or some sort of an event that explains the noise program. So, if I sent this out by my Google Mail, I wouldn't know what links they're clicking on, and I wouldn't know who's opening my emails or not. But using MailChimp, in addition to trying to avoid spam filters with doing the hello, Jason, hello, Cheryl, hello, Jamie, I can get this data back from the campaign that I send out. Oh, and here, so this kind of opens a different discussion, and this is sort of underlying a lot of what we're talking about today. So a lot of the stuff that all of the panelists were talking about today are talking about trying to reach out to customers and prospects by email, by either querying a database or intake forms or building your own database. But I don't know about you, but I get email, and sometimes I get a little bit buried by it. And sometimes you talk to somebody that you meant to put into a campaign, and you're like, didn't you see my super important email? Yeah, I did, but I forgot about it, or I didn't have time to read it, or I read it, but I don't remember. So email gets lost. As much as email is great, email also gets lost. So like I was talking about, we get too much of it sometimes, we get buried in it. And then, in the case I was giving you as an example for me, my email got sent to their spam and junk folder. And so if I don't connect with them afterwards by some other way, like they had no idea that I sent that email. So this is maybe subject for another discussion, but we need to think of ways to reach our targets that are other than email, outreaching beyond email. And so I saw Donna was on earlier, and I was trying to connect with her, but she was telling me that she uses the Remind system at San Diego State to do things by text messaging. I was talking to another one of our colleagues who actually is running a recruiting event today. That's why she couldn't be with us today. But she uses Slick Text, which is at Cal Poly San Luis Obispo. And I think both of these, I know Slick Text, there's some amount that you have to pay to use it. I'm not sure about Remind, but I'm sure there's lots of different ways that you can try to reach people by text messaging. And thanks, Donna. I see your comment in the chat box. But in addition to text messaging systems, there's also other ways that we can potentially use to try to reach our prospects, our people, our customers, if you want to call them that. That's not necessarily email. And I list some of them here at the bottom: social media, web pages, Discord, Slack, etc. And Jamie actually made a nice slide that I'll kind of let her talk about, that we need to start to think about other ways to reach our people. That's not just email. Jamie, did you want to talk a little bit about what you put on this slide?
Oh yeah, for sure. I was just putting the URL for Remind. I think that's the app. Donna, is that the one you guys use? It sounds interesting. And then we had a little side conversation too. Howard was asking about MailChimp versus Constant Contact, Jason. So maybe you can speak to that later. I think they are quite similar in that they collect similar metrics, because I used Constant Contact for probably almost like 7 years or more. So I just wanted to point out social media, because I think that's a really interesting thing for us to approach. We have to all admit we're of a certain generation. So digital natives, I am not necessarily, I'm kind of on the cusp of it, but we are living in that space now. And so one thing we've done, although it's not like super successful yet, is we are mining for data about postgraduate right? Like, where are the teachers after they've left us? They lose their institutional emails. Trying to reach alumni is something most of us don't have bandwidth to do. So we've kind of done that through social media. We had a Facebook group in which I would have students go and look for the names of alumni in the area and try to find them to connect and bring them into the center's page. And then we would collect data that way too, and also disseminate information about, you know, graduate programs, because we're trying to get them back into the master's program post credential, because they're not always doing it immediately after. Like, this is a great way to reach them. And then I was wondering what other people were doing with YouTube channels for providing information for interested students coming to their institution. Instagram. And then of course, we're moving into a different space altogether as we get into Meta, which is this 3D world in which people are actually interacting, learning information. What are people doing? Or an even older generation, Donna said. What are people doing to engage in that space and to become literate in it? And what are our thoughts as a CSU system about using that to really spend information out to younger students? TikTok too. So when I think about what Jason was talking about in terms of feedback, it's true. My students who adore me and come to me for advising will tell me, I didn't read your 5 emails, Jamie, you sent this semester. I just didn't, you know, but they're on here a lot, right? Scrolling. So I wonder, what is the use of social media in that space to give them information that's accurate, engaging, and also how do we engage in that space? These remind systems, they seem very one way, right? In terms of we're sending them information, but are they able to text back? Are they able to communicate and engage with that information? Those are things that I think we should think about moving forward for recruitment. Okay, enough. Thanks.
Yeah, absolutely. And kind of thanks, Jamie. What we're talking about as we open the webinar is we don't have all the answers. We're not even saying that what we're sharing is the best way to do these things, but we just thought we'd share some of these things, open hopefully people's minds, and maybe open the channels for discussion about doing things differently. Because if we keep doing things the same way and maybe we're not getting the results that we want, or maybe we could get better results, you know, that's kind of, you know, we can all help each other, right? And I can see Donna in the chat is talking about they're starting to do some stuff in the metaverse as well. We have, if you know Dr. Michelle Korb at East Bay, our science educator here, we talk about these different ways to try to reach people, and she's like, yeah, I can, you know, I'll do stuff on TikTok. So I'm not a TikTok person. I try to keep my daughters off of TikTok. But I think the bottom line is we need to meet our people, our prospects, our customers with where they are. And we need to communicate with them in a way that they receive information the best. And if that's email, that's great. But you know, I'll just speak for myself. I don't TikTok, right? So if somebody's on that platform and that's the way that they get most of their information, I'm not able to reach them. And even if I was to try to generate content on TikTok, I'm of a different generation than some of these people that we're trying to reach. And so the content that I produce might not connect with them. And so those are different things that we would want to consider and think about. And, you know, maybe this is grounds for a future discussion is what are some of these alternative ways that we're exploring, knowing that we have to do them, but also we were talking to Donnie a little bit earlier, and if we talk about some of these messaging platforms like Discord and Slack and WhatsApp and all of these other ones, now you have like 8 different apps and 8 different messaging platforms that you're trying to keep track of. And who's in charge of that, first of all, for the people at the university who's going to do that? And number 2, what's the best platform? Is there even a best one? Or do we have to be on all 8 of these? So Ginger, did you want to chime in on this? I see a hand up.
Yeah, I was just thinking about from an undergrad level, thinking about all the different medias that you're talking about. I think the first thing, if anyone's wanting to implement any type of communication plan, is to actually think about what's your messaging you're wanting to get out, and then what's the mode and delivery of it. Because from an undergrad level, we had people talking to us all about, let's do TikToks, let's do Instagram. The amount of time it was taking to film like a 2-minute video was like, it outweighed what we should do. What I would suggest, something you might want to consider in partnering with the undergraduate office, is or even communications and marketing. If your campus is looking to revamp anything, undergraduate offices tend to want to do videos. You want to get well-produced videos that you can either have your students do, or you hire an outside videographer, rather than you pay $10,000 for 5 videos, is to see how you can partner with the undergraduate, where when they're creating their videos and putting proposals out, see how much it would cost if you did one specifically for an overview of credential, where that might not cost as much, that you get a video out of it, as opposed to having to do a whole platform of videos that you might be able to use. And so that would be something that I would encourage you to think about, because anytime you do any type of communication, I always think like it's one thing when it's your side job. It's another if you want to do proper communication from everything you're wanting to do. You really need to think about whether or not you need to hire a person to be able to do that for you, from writing the emails, following up with the students who have questions, to what it looks like on social media or using your platform. The thing I wanted to mention was, I just heard from a colleague of mine, for those of you who don't have a texting feature, you know, we've all talked about the Graduation Initiative 2025, and a majority of CSU campuses are on the EAB platform. Our understanding is that some of the campuses have actually pulled in the credential information on students. So if you're not using EAB, you might want to see how you can use that for you to be able to track your students, but also within that feature of EAB is texting. It's already part of it, so that you don't have to possibly spend money on a new feature, a new item, if it's already paid for. So
Cool. And
Thank you.
oh, sorry, Jamie, let me kind of make a quick comment, then I'll let you chime in. That actually brings up a couple of points in my mind. Number one, that I see some of it going in the chat box, is whether you're using a graduate student assistant or administrative assistant or something like that, people move on and people leave, right? And so now you have to backfill, and if you can find a way to fund that person, and we've had that conversation on our campus before, that's sometimes easier said than done. And I'll half jokingly say that I think Ginger's in Southern California. She's closer to Hollywood than I am. You could probably find like a film and media intern or something like that to help you do this. But up here in the Bay Area, we have our Silicon Valley people. The other thing that I saw Jacqueline just mention it in the chat box is, if you're going to put something on some of these social media platforms, you have to be conscious that this is now a, you know, they always say, be careful what you put on social media, because now it's a publicly accessible thing. So to Jacqueline's point, whether you're talking about universities marketing or branding type of a thing, or in a previous industry that I was in that was heavily regulated for compliance and things like that, you need to be mindful of what you put on a public platform that you're putting out publicly. And so, you know, in other webinars that we've done, we've talked about, and this is why I value the one-on-one conversations that I do with some of our prospects on Zoom. If you're one-on-one, we can, you know, we can pretty much say whatever we want. You know, we don't want to misrepresent, or we don't want to say things that are not correct. But there's more of a safety there, if I want to call it that people can ask whatever they want, and we can have a pretty open dialogue. Versus, you know, if you're going to put something publicly on a platform like this, you need to just be mindful of what you're saying and what you're putting out there. So, Jamie, did you want to chime in?
Yeah, only there's a lot of great conversation going on. Jacqueline has a really good point about the campaigns and being consistent with university standards. So I actually attend the university-wide communications committee, and so that assures that, you know, whatever messaging we're sending out is consistent with policy, CSU policy, right? The second thing is like Rongji, I hope I said your name right, I apologize if I didn't, was pointing out that they have an Instagram for STEM teachers, which is awesome, but it wasn't manned, like Jason was saying, like people leave. So what are the utilizations we can use with students? What are, you know, who are our student assistants? How can we use our graduate students and student assistants to really help manage the channel and really create engagement in that space? And so that's something we are doing, but you have to supervise them, right? You have to audit their posts to assure that the information is consistent and safe, and not revealing any private information. I apologize, my dog is barking the moment I choose to speak. So some of the platforms that we have used to also create metrics and create data between social media channels are Buffer and Hootsuite. Is anybody familiar with any of those? We can drop them in the chat. That also is a way for you to create media and information dissemination campaigns across platforms, but have them all in one place. Because the major complaint is, you're right, there are logins for different accounts, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, whatever. You can kind of centralize them in one place. And so I would just like to offer that.
Cool. So I think just based on this little back and forth dialogue, as well as what I'm seeing in the chat box, this is definitely a hot topic that we could probably do another session on, or like a working group or whatever the case may be. I'm not committing us to anything right now because, like I said, we're all super busy. But we have just kind of time check. We have about 15 minutes left until 12:30, and we want to be respectful of your time. I'm gonna throw up some of these kind of these open Q&A fireside chat questions that I kind of pre-baked. And this is sort of a somewhat informal section, like I was telling you. We're going to throw up a few questions here. If you're in the audience, you're welcome to throw something in the chat. If you want to unmute, I think we might be able to unmute you, but some of these topics we've hit already in some of the campus presentations. But if you may hear some things from some of the other campuses if they're doing something that wasn't in the quote unquote formal presentation. Okay, so let me throw this out to our panelists. And we were talking about this earlier. Do you use a CRM system? What do you use? How is that system working for you? And what challenges do you run into? So let me kind of preface this by saying, it doesn't necessarily matter what you use as long as you use something, right? Even if it's, and we all have our funny stories about writing somebody's name on a napkin and their email address or their phone number, and that's how it all started, or whether you do it on paper or just a spreadsheet. But let me throw it out to the panelists. What do you all use, and what challenges do you run into if you're using that? So you saw that I use MailChimp, and aside from MailChimp, and Cheryl, I saw you unmuting. Aside from MailChimp, I also actually use a spreadsheet. So I use just a regular Google's Google Sheet, like Excel. So I have other stuff that I keep a list on Excel, because in some ways that's sometimes easier than MailChimp. Cheryl, did you want to chime in?
Yes, thank you. Okay, so our university, the undergraduate advisors, I know they use a system called Chico State 360. It's an advising platform, and it's used for like making notes, mainly for undergraduate advisors, and to focus on student retention. And it's not accessible to everyone, but that I know that is a platform we use. So I know accessibility may be a concern. I know Ginger and I were talking about that earlier.
And just to circle back on a point that was made earlier, I haven't used Constant Contact personally, but I think Constant Contact is probably very similar to MailChimp. And then Donna was saying in the chat box that she uses more. So whatever it is, Jamie's using Google Forms. Whatever it is, I mean, just, keep a list. If it's some list is better than no list, right? And I guess that's what I would encourage, is it doesn't have to be super fancy, as long as if you don't have one, get one started.
Cheryl, the one at Chico State, that's a Salesforce Target X platform. They tailor to prospective students. So it'd be definitely one of those things we want to enter into a conversation of who actually owns it and how it can be utilized by other areas around campus. And I think for what I've seen on other university campuses, and even our own at Channel Islands, was, the admissions office had one thing, academic advisement had another, credential program didn't have anything. And I know the IT office was like, we don't want 5 different areas having 5 different licenses on something. So what can we done to actually pull together on being able to use that? And I think it's entering into those conversations of, now is the time where we need to figure out how we can have either access to a communication tool or a coordinated communication tool where we can be able to send out proper information.
Cool. Kathy has her hand up. Are we able to unmute Kathy, or can she unmute herself?
Hi. Thank you for unmuting me. And, you know, CSU Channel Islands is kind of a smaller campus. And as Ginger mentioned, you know, because of it's a smaller campus, our projects aren't always divided up the same way as other campuses. But I was wondering, Ginger, so this may sound really naive and silly, but I do not know what EAB refers to. It sounds really interesting. And could you explain a little more about how to use it?
Yeah, it's for those who are not familiar, it's the Chancellor's Office helped at one point sponsor it, but I'm trying to get the acronym of it. But the EAB is a tool that campuses have all been encouraged as part of a tool to utilize to be able to track students for retention, run data analytics, all in the name of really focusing also on GI 2025. And Kathy, good to see you. What you want to do is you want to contact the person who probably was a big proponent of it. You can actually talk to Colleen, the registrar's office, or Ernesto, advising at the majority of campuses would know about the tool they're using and how you can use that for your program. And once I find the website of what it is, I will add it into the chat. I wanted to say it was Education Advisory Board, but I don't want to give the wrong website out.
Cool. Jesus, did you want to chime in?
Yes, I did actually. If I'm not mistaken, I think what was previously known as EAB is now known as Navigate LA. I think the name changed sometime within the last couple of years. And that's exactly what the tool is. It's basically a way for you to use filters to check on students' statuses, different students, different categories. So you can look up freshmen, you can look up seniors, juniors, students that are in a specific class. And it's also used for campaigns, and it's basically a tracking tool. And if I'm not mistaken, that EAB is now Navigate LA.
Right. And yeah, I think to Jesus's point, that sounds like a local branding. I would guess in Northern California, it might not be called Navigate LA, but there's some sort of a system probably that you can tap into with your respective area and campus. Cool. All right, let's keep going here. I'm keeping an eye on the clock. We talked about this a little bit already in the exchange and the interchange, which is great. So this I might just kind of run through this kind of quickly, but how do you communicate, follow up with prospects and applicants? We talked about the importance of follow-up and communication. We talked about challenges with email and a lot of that stuff in the chat. Any other kind of last comments we want to make on this? You know, how do we communicate with our prospects and applicants?
I guess I contact some of the faculty members in the educational prereqs, and they post on Blackboard Learn, or I guess we talked about other institutions use Canvas. So that helps, just sending a quick little blurb out to the students when they're in class or on their discussion boards.
Yeah, I know that with the colleagues that I was talking to at Cal Poly, San Luis Obispo, they're using the text messaging system that directs them to like a web page or like a bulletin board. So in the text message, obviously you don't want a super long text message that you're sending out, but it says, hey, there's something new on whatever that page is, and that gives them a chance to direct them to some new content. All right, let's throw this one out. And obviously this is worth more than the few minutes that we're going to give it, but how do you use your data to assess results and improve future efforts? For anybody that maybe hasn't talked about this before. I used a very simple example about my MailChimp campaigns and looking at open rates and that kind of a thing, but anything anybody wants to add in on this?
Yes, I definitely always analyze our analytics. I have a pixel on our homepage at classteachers.org where I can decipher location, even age, and the device they're using. So a lot are on the mobile device now. So I can really tailor my marketing campaign. So that's how I use the data.
Yeah. There's also, if you're using social media, and again, I'm not an expert at this by any means, but you can look at click rates in social media and like web pages and things like that. If you're running an event, whether it's in person or online, you can look at how many people registered or RSVP'd versus how many attended, with the understanding that like something like this, we also send out a recording. So just because people don't attend live, doesn't mean that you're not reaching your audience. If it's being recorded, then you can also, that may be in there as well. So there's considerations to data also, right? I think that we all know is data is great, but data is subject to interpretation. So the number by itself doesn't necessarily always tell the whole story. There's also, other considerations. How about this one? Where do you all house your data? How do you keep it all straight? And this may be campus specific, because I at East Bay, we are Google centric. And I think other campuses use like OneDrive or other systems.
I think the challenge, Jason, with that is that there is level 1 data. There's certain private data that we're not allowed to host on Google. I was talking to somebody about that. Maybe it was Jacqueline. So I think that the problem is that we had to move away from a lot of our Google databases because we were possibly violating those policies, right? So we used a cloud-based system. Our campus uses something called Box, which is similar to Dropbox. We connected to Qualtrics. Qualtrics is our data management system for like applications and intake. And so the complaint is, though, is that it's not as the UI, the user interface isn't always that pretty or understandable. And so that's a challenge for a lot of us staff who haven't had a lot of deep training in it. So that tends to be, we're still kind of in a hybrid Google Qualtrics space. Let's make sense, if that makes sense, to be honest. So it's a challenge.
Yeah, I know that I think somebody mentioned Canvas and Blackboard earlier, and some of the teachers in some of the classrooms around us in our districts use Google Classroom, and there was concerns about Google Classroom and things like that. So I think that's a good point that you make, Jamie, about user friendliness versus security versus all this other stuff. And I would guess that none of us are IT professionals here on this webinar. I'm certainly not. But there's a consideration to user friendliness versus security and effectiveness too. All right, let's keep going in those last couple of minutes. This is kind of a different take on things. So we didn't talk about this as much, but I think we can all appreciate that we work a lot of times interdepartmentally and interdisciplinarily and across campuses like we are right now. How do you get everyone organized? How do you best communicate or get things done when you have to work laterally? I use Doodlepoll, so I know that I do that. And then we do, at least at East Bay, we do regular monthly meetings with our interdepartmental and interdisciplinary group that's focused on STEM teacher recruiting. So there's nothing like getting together in person, whether it's online or whether it's live. But it's not always feasible necessarily to get everybody online and live at the same time. Do any of you use Slack or Discord or any of those messaging systems at your campuses?
We use Teams.
Microsoft Teams? I've heard that's good. I've never used it.
We use Teams.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, and this is part of this is it's interesting to see what other groups and other campuses do, because I get so wrapped up in my world that I do what I do. At San Diego, Donna's saying she uses Slack, but only among certain groups.
I think the challenge with Teams or any of the Outlook-based programs is they're restricted to only CSU people. So if you have stakeholders and partners who are outside of the institution, I don't think we can invite them in to those platforms. Correct me if I'm
Right.
wrong, colleagues, but and I think that's why we opt for other things, which is burdensome to have multiple platforms like Slack and other places, because then you have to manage more than one line, right? That's
Yeah.
communication.
So back to what Jamie was sharing with doodle polls and when it's good, if you're trying to schedule like a team meeting or something like that, you could also use Google Calendar and just look at people's calendars, assuming that they keep them up. But if they don't keep them up, then that's one thing. And then if they're outside of your environment, then you might not see that. So that's another consideration. So we're right at 12:30. So let me just kind of wrap this up and say thank you to everybody who joined us here live, our panelists. Thank you to all of you. Happy rest of your Friday, and happy getting towards the end of the semester. I know it's all crazy time, but soon enough we'll be done with spring semester. So thank you to all of you, and have a great rest of your day and weekend.